Happy Friday, everybody. This is RRP, and this is some footage that some individuals took from this Boise, Idaho group today of the actual protest and people walking up to the Capitol. It looks like maybe walking away from the Capitol building at this point, but have a look there, and we'll be right with you. As you can see, a pretty peaceful protest from everyone out there today on the ground in Idaho at the Capitol, walking away. Maybe not as close on the social distancing as maybe some would have liked to see, but peaceful nonetheless, exercising what I believe to be their rights. So, interestingly enough, people on the other side, on the flip side, are panicking. People who don't want that to happen. There are individuals out there saying all sorts of things right now, like, for example, this lady, we're all going to die from you. That's what one person put. From the meetings today, or the people walking and protesting today, doing their peaceful protest, they say you refuse to stay in, you're violating our rights, yada, 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 yada. I've read a lot of comments out there that were pretty nasty, you would say, for some people that are supposed to be accepting and loving towards other people, probably not doing the best optimal job. So, that being said, we have with us today, and I'll bring him on just a minute, is Edward Dindinger. He's an attorney in Idaho. And he can correct me here in a minute if I'm wrong. I believe the practice started a few years ago. So we'll get some of his thoughts and ideas on what's going on in Idaho. What does the law say? What are people telling him and asking him? You know, obviously it's probably changed his business a little bit and how they've had to operate, and we'll learn about that here in a second. But to everybody who was out protesting today, at least thank you for keeping it peaceful. I think it sets a good example for people that we do have the right to peaceful protest, like we have the right to so many other things that are currently kind of being infringed upon in my stance, the way that I look at it. So we'll go from there, give it a minute here, and we're going to bring in Edward to the conversation. And you guys feel free to ask any questions you may want to ask in the comments. Like, follow, and share this so that other people can see it and join and ask any questions they may have. I don't care if they're for it or against it. We love to hear both ways, whatever their thoughts may be, just to get people involved and have some civil conversation, which is pretty absent in our world right now. People just aren't very civil and good at having conversation together. So we'll get ready to jump in here now. We'll get him brought up. All right. Edward, Mr. Dindinger, how are you this happy Friday after dinner time?
I'm actually feeling pretty good, Josiah, and thanks for having me on. Anytime you go to one of these events and you're around people that kind of feel the same way you do, it gives you a sense of, it hardens you a bit. I think some of it's probably false, right? It's kind of like when we're in these Facebook groups and you're talking among people who kind of think like you, and you get this false sense that a lot of people think like you, but really we're a tiny minority. I think that's still likely true, but it still is good to get out, and especially after so long, not being able to be around like-minded friends and associates. I saw a lot of friends today. I was glad to see.
Sure.
You are correct. I mean, just to give people a little bit of background, I am an attorney in Boise, Idaho. My partner, Larson Kohler, and I started our practice January 4th of 2018. So we're just past 2 years. And as everyone knows, the first year for any business is tight belt, very, very difficult. The second year was a lot better. And, right when all this stuff happened, actually, we had an ad out looking for an associate to hire our first associate attorney. We have an assistant at our Boise office, and there's an assistant at the Meridian office, but we really wanted an associate attorney to join us. and that's been put on hold. I mean, we've been more fortunate than most people who have been affected in that we are still getting calls, and we're technically considered essential. The order is kind of ambiguous. It says legal services are still permitted to the extent that they're needed to comply with legal mandates.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I mean, does that mean you're only able to file stuff where there's a deadline coming up?
Sure.
You know, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag, Governor Little. I had some people in my office this week who were signing business operating agreements and other things that there wasn't a court deadline for.
Sure.
Take me in.
Yeah, well, I feel like you may have some other type of things on your hands. I don't know exactly all the different types of law you practice, but with the people going out and protesting, someone's eventually. I know the Department of Justice said that they're not to arrest people or detain people for peaceful protests, but I just have an odd feeling it's probably
where did they say that, Josiah?
There was a release, I believe, from the Department of Justice I saw yesterday that was posted that they're not supposed to arrest or detain people for peaceful protests. So we'll see if that happens.
If that's the case, I'm pleasantly surprised by the U.S. DOJ.
But we'll see if they actually comply. I think that's the problem, right? So there's what they say and then what actually happens at a local level. And I think that's going to be the interesting part of kind of moving forward. We had someone in Colorado who the police were called on him. He was out with his wife and his 6-year-old daughter or something like that playing softball. And someone called the cops and they handcuffed him and put him in the back of the car in front of his daughter because they thought he was with another group that was playing softball. And so that's the kind of environment.
That's a reason to handcuff someone in front of their kids.
Yeah, and if this experience hasn't been traumatizing enough for people all of a sudden getting yanked out of school, not really understanding why and how that's all, what led to that, and then being where you're going to get lunch from the bus stop, like just all these different things. They can't see their friends. They've got to wave from half a mile away and hope they see them through the binoculars. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on. So I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions. So here's the numbers that I got. There's, as of yesterday, there were 1,485 cases in Idaho, 41 deaths at the time that they extended this stay-at-home order.
Which was Wednesday, 2 days ago.
Okay, through the end of April, right?
Yeah.
They say they want to get it back started in May. I doubt it. If they felt like that was going to happen, they probably wouldn't have extended it that far. There's just nothing in me that says that it's going to go from we think we need to extend it to this date and then all of a sudden everything will be dropped and we'll go back to normal.
Yeah, well, and the state officials are saying as much. There were some interviews on Idaho Public Television last night. The governor, the director of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and then I believe the state epidemiologist, I believe her last name is Hahn. I don't remember the first name, but essentially they were all saying, hey, this is the new normal, anticipate this. And they're talking about, I mean, literally, they're talking about we might have to keep doing this until there is an effective vaccine or effective therapeutics. Which those estimates are 18 to 24 months. And I'm sorry, I just don't think, a first world advanced civilized society requires a certain amount of productive capacity and wealth generation. We're not, if we're not working, we're not going to live like people who are working. We're going to live like countries where people don't work.
Sure.
That's my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of questions that start kind of soaring around. I think one of the big ones that's going is like, what are my actual rights as a citizen? And are you intruding on my rights by telling me I can't go here or there? And I don't want to say if it was a week or two, it'd be okay. But for most people, we're on like week 5 of this time of being locked in and not being able to go out and do different things. I understand the meaning behind why they did it and why they felt like it was necessary. But I also feel like we live in a free society. This isn't communist China. You can ask people not to go out, but they have the right as citizens to go and do certain things. And we would expect them, in my opinion, we would expect them to be responsible like they would be responsible with any other area of their life. If you have a gun, you have a legal right to have to carry or to have protection at your home. Some people take that right and make some irresponsible choices and hurt other people. I don't think that's okay to hurt other people.
Yeah, I would say they're not exercising the right at that point, right? I mean, you have a property right in your gun. And a property right really, and we might get in far field, and I don't want to get too far afield, so rein me in if you want to. But I'm just saying a property right is essentially a right of exclusion, right? It's not necessarily a right of use. I mean, your property right in your car doesn't entitle you to go anywhere and everywhere with your car. Likewise with the gun, it doesn't entitle you to perform any action with that item.
Right.
It simply allows you to exclude others' use or permit their use upon terms that you want, lease, rent, license, whatever. So yeah, I wouldn't even say that you're exercising the right. And so when people say you're taking your rights too far, either you are, and in which case you're not exercising your right, or they are using a dishonest rephrasing there to kind of entrap you. Sure. And too far, if you are not violating the rights of somebody else, and this is where people go wrong, no one has a clear, coherent definition of rights. I mean, I've seen people throw around, oh, I have a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and I can't pursue my happiness if I'm sick. Sure. Therefore, first of all, the Declaration of Independence is not the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence is more or less a propaganda document. And I don't use that term negatively, but it was essentially, this is our best explanation of what we're doing. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that's a slogan. That's not a coherent political theory or theory of rights or theory of law. The Constitution is a source of law, and you won't find pursuit of happiness. I mean, it's just far too indefinite. Anyone can go, you can justify literally anything if you're saying you're violating my right to pursuit of happiness.
Sure. Yeah, and so I think the ones that we really are more I think people should be more concerned about, in my opinion. And again, I'm not saying that people should go gather in the biggest group they can and hug it out. I mean, I'm saying that they should be semi-intelligent, we would expect them to be with any other place. Now, I know people don't like it compared to the flu and different things like that, but at the same time, the flu can kill you. I think you should exercise not caution in the way of locking people down, but the same caution you should exercise if you were to get the flu, like not going to work, like protecting and wearing a mask if you have it, not going around people and touching them if you have. Those are the same practices that we should employ as just ordinary Americans, and not be told we have to lock down for the next, I don't know, probably 4, 5, 6 more weeks in some cases, and that's locked down. And I'm not talking about phase 1 of social distancing where people can go out, kind of. Mm-hmm. I think that's what worries me the most is that, and one of the ways I look at that is like, as a citizen, you look at like Michigan, for example, they're telling people you can't buy a hose when you go to the grocery store. We'll shut down the big box retailers. I feel like that's an infringement of right. If I'm at the store buying things, I should be able to buy a hose.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's an infringement on the right of contract between you and the retailer. It's an infringement on the retailer's property rights, right? When you're telling the retailer, hey, in your store, you need to rope off these items because we have arbitrarily deemed them non-essential and people can't buy them. I mean, that's obviously a property rights infringement. I mean, how about just declaring certain industries essential and non-essential?
Yep.
And that's, I mean, kind of that's where I have a problem. And people can say, oh, you were out violating the law today. And I say, well, in this country, laws are typically made by legislatures or they're made by Congress. What we have now in the state of Idaho right now, what we have is a king. We don't have a governor. We have a king because we have merged the legislative with the executive. We are now a unitary government. The judiciary is largely silent on this issue thus far. And so we have a unitary government where the governor makes the laws and enforces the laws, right? Yeah. He says, thou shalt not do this. And if thou does this, this is the penalty.
Yeah, it's like the emergency clauses that allow those things to be enacted. Is that right? I mean,
yeah, and I've had disagreements with people on this. I agree. First of all, I think that they are unjust, right? It's possible for something to be legal, constitutional, but also unjust, right? I mean, the Constitution as originally constituted authorized literal chattel slavery. I mean, it literally enshrined the slavery of human beings. So, I mean, if you just cross the constitutional hurdle, that doesn't get you far enough. I think this is unconstitutional per se. I mean, these are per se violations of the First Amendment, et cetera. But I think even if you look at the statutes, and I know you're in Colorado, I'm in Idaho, the state statutes vary. But in my opinion, and I've done some legal research on this, I've looked into the statutes. In my opinion, the state statutes in Idaho do not authorize what has been done. And let me just give you one quick example. So, the government here in Idaho will point to a statute which authorizes the director of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare to quarantine or isolate individuals, issue orders to quarantine or isolate individuals, right?
Okay.
Well, and people say, oh, well, that authorizes him to quarantine the entire state. Well, up until, 25, 30, 35 days ago, the word quarantine in the English language literally only meant quarantining the known sick or the known exposed. It had nothing to do with quarantining entire populations. I mean, so we're just redefining terms. Again, I think the constitutional arguments are specious. Here in Idaho, they've cited two provisions of the state constitution to authorize this. The first is the provision which designates the governor as the commander of the state militia.
Okay.
But that's literally all it does. It doesn't authorize arbitrary closures of certain industries or businesses. The other provision they cite is the one that designates the governor as the supreme executive authority. Yep. But if you read the rest of it, it just says that he has the duty to faithfully execute the laws, which is the duty of any chief executive, right? I mean, that's nothing unusual or strange. It certainly doesn't authorize this. So, again, I think all the legal arguments are specious. I do believe it's statutorily, it's illegal. I believe it's unconstitutional. I also believe it's unjust. Josiah, would you let me pause for 1 minute and plug this computer in so it doesn't die on us?
Absolutely. Go for it. So as he's doing that, I will say that I think a lot of people have the understanding, they feel like there's been some constitutional rights that have been violated and really infringed upon in a lot of different ways and manners. And one of those ways, which we'll probably get in here too in a second, is this religious meetings and groups that aren't being allowed to meet. But as most people know, it's given to you in the Constitution that you have the right, and we have the right to practice the religion as we see fit. And a lot of places now, welcome back. Hopefully you got that charger.
Thank you. We're good to go now.
So one of the things that I was saying is that church meetings, religious meetings, synagogues, whatever it may be that you're a part of, have obviously come to a halt as far as in-person meetings. I feel like people are pretty in the know about that. Okay,
I know of some violations, but yes, legally they have come to a halt.
Legally, they've come to a halt
for the first time ever, and this is important. I mean, for the first time ever in the state of Idaho that I'm aware of, it is illegal to hold a church service.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a criminal offense.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a guy, Bishop Gwynn, who died, I think, from Mississippi. Okay, so he held a service, and he said he will either stop when he gets arrested and in prison, or when he's in the hospital. Unfortunately, he ended up in the hospital and he died. However, my take on that is simple. It was his right to do it, and he chose to do it knowing the risk. The people who went know the risk, and if that happens, he died doing something he was passionate about and something he wanted to do, and as an American had the right to be doing.
I agree with all that. I mean, I think it's also worthwhile to point out that he was an elderly man, in the South, which has a lower life expectancy than the rest of the country for whatever reason. I mean, dietary reasons, whatever. So, an elderly, they had a front page.
Are you talking about our fried chicken?
I am. I'm talking about that fried chicken.
I just wanted to check.
So they had a front page story of the Idaho Statesman, which is the newspaper of record in the state. And the headline was, "One death from coronavirus at Boise nursing home." And then you look over in the corner and in tiny print, it says 39 deaths in the state. When is the last time you read a news story about a single non-homicidal death in a nursing home? I mean, it's kind of like a dog bites man story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It happens. We expect it. And it could have been from the flu or anything else, right? But it's like the coronavirus. And I think there's issues with the way they're counting it also. Yeah. But I'm not one of these people who think the whole thing's made up. I don't think it's caused by 5G, whatever. I think it's real. People are getting sick. In my business, we have moved most of our client consultations to this format or telephone or whatever, just to minimize the contact. I will say at the protest today, I shook hands with a bunch of people. They're people I've known for years. I like them. What can I say? It's a risk I was willing to take.
Sure.
And from what I understand, like I said, 18 to 24 months before we develop a vaccine or therapeutics, human life won't sustain itself. So if I have to get it, frankly, I hate being sick, but I'd rather be sick right now where the courts are on low load than get sick, 8 months from now when everything's ramped back up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like, we're supposed to develop herd immunity, but you can't develop herd immunity if
until people are out. Yeah.
Right.
They've got to be out and be willing. Here's the thing. I understand people want to get out. People want to be close to each other. People want to, shake hands. I don't personally have an issue with them doing that if they understand, the risks that come with that. I also don't have any problem if you were to go shake someone's hand and they were to say, hey, I'm not really comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I had one or two people do that to me today also. Yeah, that's fine.
I think the bigger problem is what's going to happen is people, and you've already probably seen comments like this where it's pretty insane out there, but people are just letting people have it about you're killing people and look how close you were to other people. So here's what I'd say to that. I think there's
some real tolerant people, by the way.
Yes. I mean, they're tolerant for their own things, of course. Everybody's tolerant for their own thing. But what I would say to that is I think the interesting piece for me is that in an ideal world, we love a peaceful protest where everybody keeps their distance. In a way, it kind of goes against what some of the protest is for, though, because it's like, hey, we miss our friends, and hey, we miss having our barbecues, and look, you can't really do those things without breaking social distancing guidelines, which I think, honestly, is going to be the bigger problems for churches that are excited that in phase 1, they get to start having church. Kind of, right? Because your platform of what you thought church is not going to be the same. If you've got to keep 6 feet of distance between everybody in there in order to meet and whatever other guidelines they may have, then you're not going to be able to go back to. There's no restaurant I know that can function on 6 feet of distance between everybody in there. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So that's really the issue is like, yes, you can do it, but how quickly you get back to normal life, I think is suspect. I don't think you're getting back to what we're going to call normal life in these things for a while, unless you're willing to go against the grain. And ultimately, I think that's what these protests are going to have to answer. Will they make a difference? My brother said he thinks, people should sue their local governments for violation of their rights, and businesses should sue their local governments. And what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, like I told you, I think it's illegal and unconstitutional. But you know what? I'm the first one to admit that I'm in the minority. I'm in the minority of people, and I'm in the minority of attorneys. Right? Attorneys are just like everybody else, right? There's like 10% of us that hardcore, I don't know what you want to call it, pro-liberty, pro-constitution, whatever. 10% hardcore status. They want us to live in cages, essentially. And then there's 80% in the middle that are complacent, they're apathetic, whatever. So, and here's the thing is that judges and justices are culled out of the attorney caste, right? So they reflect that makeup.
Yep.
So I've told people, I've consulted with a bunch of people about this, like business owners and other people that are affected. And basically my advice to them is, I think you have a case, right? But, a legal opinion is only worth anything until a judge rules otherwise, right?
Yep.
And the Supreme Court, whether it's the state Supreme Court or the federal Supreme Court, they're not last because they're right. They're right because they're last, right? And I frankly think the odds of a successful challenge legally are low. I'm pessimistic. I'm risk averse. So those things play into it. But in my honest legal judgment, I have a feeling we might make some bad case law. And that's what I'm worried about too. I've talked to some people, we're looking for the right plaintiff, the right case, because we don't want to make bad case law. I mean, that's the most important thing. Really.
Well, and I think by the time they're done getting it through, it's good for the protection of rights, but by the time you're done getting it through, you're probably back to normal at that point anyway, or the closest semblance, hopefully, the closest semblance to normal, because court cases like that take forever to go through there and get to the Supreme Court if need be, and then go from your state Supreme Court all the way up to the real Supreme Court, I'll call it, the federal Supreme Court. So there, I think and then I think there's a lot of other things that come into, like, because then you've got to legalize and go through what is the governor allowed to do? What is the president allowed to do? What are these people allowed to do legally?
Yeah, and the courts have a long history of giving deference to executive action, especially in an emergency. And let's not kid ourselves. Courts are political bodies, right? I mean, in Idaho, we elect our Supreme Court justices. It's not quite the same in the federal system, but they are political bodies. And I do feel that myself and people who feel the way I do, again, this gets back to what I started with. We're at this protest, we're on Facebook, we're hearing a lot of like-minded stuff in the echo chamber. But we're a tiny voice in the wilderness. Honestly, I think that courts are going to be reluctant to go against the majority grain of public opinion. I mean, right after this rally today, literally within a couple hours of this rally today, the Idaho Statesman Editorial Board released a Friday evening editorial, basically saying that, hey, they're doing things Idahoans don't want. Real Idahoans don't want this. To that I would say, if we look at your subscription numbers over time, it's pretty abundantly clear to me that most Idahoans don't want the Idaho Statesman either. Yeah. At least they're not willing to pay more than a few cents a day for it. But, so again, I'm not optimistic about a court challenge. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Christina said people were driving by that were in support, and some people were flipping them off, yelling at them in front of her children. Lady got out of her car and spit and coughed on people. Right. Yeah,
I saw the altercation with the lady in the car. It was actually probably the most humorous thing that happened. So the lady pulls. So they didn't close down the street right in front of the Capitol. Yeah. So cars are still going by, and a lot of the cars are supportive, whatever. Well, this one lady pulls up Nevada plates, stops right in front of the Capitol. She gets out of her car, leaves the door open, walks around, and starts. I didn't see spit. I didn't see cough. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying it did. What I saw was she was screaming obscenities toward the protesters, flipping them off, etc. And then, unbeknownst to her, while she had left her car door open, someone else comes around the other side, pulls her keys out of the ignition, throws them into the crowd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so she was stuck there. And I don't advocate theft in any form, but it was funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it was funny. She was freaking out. The cops are like, "Hey, you got to get out of here." She's like, "I can't. I don't have a key." I drove past an hour or so later, and there was a locksmith out there rekeying her car. Oh my gosh!
This is what I mean by people can't have civil conversations anymore. Disagreements. It's you're either this way or that way, and we can't have a conversation. I try to get in on conversations on community boards and have a semblance of a conversation. I'll tell people who are worried out there about, well, look at these people. They're just going to make this even longer. We're going to be locked down even longer. I'm not saying that isn't true. They may keep people locked down longer because who knows? They may do that anyway. And I get what you want. What you should want, what everybody, in my opinion, should want in a fair world is everybody to have their rights and make good decisions, be respectful. Yep. Look, if people don't want to be within 6 feet of you and you can see that they're uncomfortable, stay 6 feet away. But
that's the thing is no one is for. I mean, freedom of assembly is also the freedom not to assemble. Freedom of association is also the freedom to disassociate or to not associate.
Sure.
No one is forcing people to be around other people. But I see it as a little bit disingenuous. Okay, our best estimates that I've heard is about 1,300 people were at the Capitol today. That sounds like a lot of people, but you know what? In this state, grocery stores are still open. Home Depot's still open.
Sure.
How many people are they having there in a week? You know what I mean?
I think even within an hour or a couple hours, there's a few hundreds of people there. I mean, exactly. I had to go out to Costco today, and there was easily 200 some people, 300 some people in Costco. Nora Wilson says it boils down to the simplest rights of people and the freedom of choice. People have the right and choice to show up to these places, and the law should not be able to pick and choose when to grant us our freedoms. I think that is a good point, Nora, and I agree with you. I think the issue, again, is here. People, if people object in a right way, in a respectful way, we should be able to have a civil conversation. I know it's not always going to go that way. And when the people, whatever side you're on, when the people on the opposite side of you act uncivil and in a crazy way, the best thing you can do is act in a more civil way and continue to respond in a better way to show them that you do care, not just about ourselves but other people. That's not always easy. Obviously, people can be extremely frustrating. I think in these times when people have very high anxiety because they're inside 90% of their day, if not more, they're barely getting out. They're having none of the normal social activities that they would typically have. they're running into issues that we don't normally see in this environment. Now, that being said, I think people should stand for their rights and protect their rights. I was talking to somebody today about this when it comes to churches. I think from how churches have reacted so far, yes, they've been obedient, but I think they've given a nod to the government to say, we'll allow you to take our right to meet at will when you tell us to do what we'll do under threat of whatever threat they're offering. And that, to me, is a scary situation, because I say when a liquor store is deemed essential because an alcoholic needs his alcohol, this is no kidding, or this is literally what these people say.
That is the justification. You're not wrong.
Because they may overdose, or not overdose, they may have withdrawals and die, and I understand that's a real thing. But the idea that this isn't something where it's equally as important for people's mental and spiritual well-being to be able to meet and congregate with people they've been meeting with their entire life. I'm going to call it an addiction, but that need is there. I mean, we know suicide has been on the rise in America for the last 3 to 4 years at a rate that we haven't really ever seen before. You're taking the suicide rate for 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds, and it's grown like 20-30% in the last few years. Now you're taking that same age demographic and pulling them into isolation, which for people who know a little bit about suicide, that's one of the worst things you can do is isolate those people. Yeah. So I think there are unintended consequences that come along with this along the way. So what, I mean, are you...
I totally agree with that. And I just want to say real quick, I totally agree with that. And I think that the mental health aspect of it has just been total. I mean, and let me just say this, the people who are criticizing us the most are normally the people who are the advocates for mental health, right? These are the people saying the government needs to spend more money on mental health.
Yep.
Well, I just read an article that the mental health and suicide crisis hotlines in Indiana are up 700%.
No doubt.
In terms of call volume. I mean, these are real human costs. I mean, you talk about the isolation. That's obviously a very real contributor to suicides. So is, losing your job, that sense of economic desperation, that loss of self-worth, all those things. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg on that.
Sure.
Because the economy is not going to bounce back. I'm just going to tell people it's not going to bounce back. It just won't. So we're going to be in a bad economic position for quite a while. And I think I fear for the toll. I do. Yeah. And I think you brought up a great point.
There's going to be a heavy toll, no doubt. But I think we will see a bounce back. I don't think we're going back to normal. I think we'll see a bounce back that will look pretty good because of how bad it is right now. When you have, in 1 week, 3 million people extra, 5 million people extra on unemployment, if not more, I think.
And you compare that to even 2008, 2009. Sure. I mean, way, way more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look. There's people saying, are you saving your stimulus in case you get another one? And I'm like, well, you should be using it on paying your mortgage and your groceries. Like, what do you mean waiting for other ones? Like, you should make sure you have a home moving forward, not be irresponsible. And that's really my concern is that they think another one's going to come.
Did you see today that the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses ran out of money?
Yeah, I actually saw that yesterday that it ran out of money, and I think that that's going to be a huge problem because they said it's a potential 40-some% of small businesses could go out of business in the next month, like a week and a half ago. And then they got the Paycheck Protection Program, which will save some of them. But here's the deal. Long term, that's not even going to save them because if you can't go back to normal restaurant function, that's a lot of small businesses right there. If you can't go back to, you think about the jobs and the summer jobs, the water parks that have already said they're not opening, amusement parks that aren't opening. You think about Disney's that's not been open. Yeah, those people will make money. Don't worry about it. But the unemployment rate is not going to go up that much if these people cannot open. And even if they can open, if your seating capacity goes down in a restaurant from being able to have 60 down to having 15 so that you can hold, 6 feet difference between tables, then you're going to need a fourth of your staff, which means a lot of those people are still going to be unemployed, or we're going to have to go to the government and get more and more and more money. And I don't know if you listen to, well, I could play the video later, but there's a worship song people play from Carrie Job that it says, how are you going to pay for it? And then the song plays and it says, 1,000 generations in your family and their children and their children and their children. And it's a joke, but it's also serious. Like, it's going to take forever to pay off the debt that we've climbed into. That honestly opening up some of the economy.
The only solution is to borrow or to print money, both of which inflate the money supply, deplete the value of savings, and the debt just gets kicked down the road. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, see, it says here, there's a lot of places, Nora says, and restrictions that aren't as necessary to. There's a lot of people who can and should be able to work. Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I would say. If you have the ability to do your job from home, I think you could. I don't think that's a bad thing. Help where you can help is, I guess, what I would say. But if there's jobs where you need to be in person, absolutely. Like, let them go do their work and let them be responsible to do their work, unless you know that there's a very high infected area there. If half the people there have COVID, obviously you probably don't want to be in that environment until it's been sanitized and those people are not there working right then.
Yeah.
But I think too, there's not a one solution for everywhere.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. There's not a one solution for everywhere. But I mean, also, let's leave aside the economic devastation for a minute. I mean, and like I mentioned to you, in our business, we have seen a dramatic drop in revenue. We've been lucky to keep our employees. We've been thankful for the clients who have still come to us. But how about this? How about the clients who can't move their cases forward? We've got custody clients that can't get a resolution for custody. They got kids who don't know where they're going to be going to school in the fall, right? And I don't know if I'm going to have an answer for them.
Yeah.
I've got criminal clients whose trials are being vacated and we have no reset date. And you have a constitutional right to a speedy trial.
Sure.
But the Idaho Supreme Court is saying it's not going to be used as an excuse to dismiss. So I mean, there's real issues with due process going on and people not being able to move cases through the justice system.
Sure.
And I think that's important. And we're not talking, so all these, we're talking about economic devastation, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about due process losses in the courts. But all we hear is deaths and illnesses, right? But no, there's no weighing. And I'm saying there's all these other costs out there that are just as unknown. I mean, we don't know how many suicides we're going to get out of this, just like they're telling us we don't know how many deaths there'd be if we weren't doing what we're doing now. But I mean, no one is doing any intelligent economic cost-benefit analysis or human value cost-benefit analysis, and it's frankly terrifying.
Well, I'm all about consistency. That's what I would say. So I think Dr. Phil got on Fox News last night and said that, look, we don't do this for automobile accidents, which kill more people. We don't do this for cigarettes, which kill more people, and so on and so forth. And I saw in a post today, this lady said, hey, I'm all for these people going in and meeting together. If they want to meet together, and let nature take its course. The sentiment there is let nature kill them. See, I think that to me is the issue, is there's no civility in that conversation. There's no civility with that response. There's no care and compassion. And they said those people who do meet should have no access to the healthcare system. Or emergency medical.
Hippocratic oath shouldn't apply.
They shouldn't get emergency medical because of their choosing to go out and do that. And I said, I'm okay.
They have the wrong opinions.
Well, I said this. I said, I'm okay with that if you're willing to do that for people who smoke and end up with cancer, they don't get treatment. People who drink and end up with liver disease, they don't get treatment. People who don't eat correctly and it causes diabetes, they don't get treatment. I mean, you're going to do that. Those are all choices that people make to live a certain way with a possible known consequence that could affect their life. And so I just say you don't treat anybody else that way. And you would always hope the best. Even if I don't like the fact that you may smoke or you may do this, I don't hope you die from it. And that's the problem.
There is no logical, non-arbitrary line that you can draw. That you know what I mean. And you talk about the meanness, just the meanness. I saw a comment on a picture that was posted by one of the newspapers today of the rally, and there was a picture of some moms with their kids. It says, "Oh, the moms brought out their little virus factories." come on, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not a way to treat people, but we are treating people because of this. But we don't treat people. You know what I mean? If you have any other communicable disease, like no one is saying you're a horrible person if you go out if you have the flu, right? And the flu kills a lot of people every year.
Absolutely.
You know, but no one is out there trying to shame the flu carriers that are out there doing business and going to Albertsons and going to Home Depot or wherever they go, you know?
Sure.
I think there's a double standard. I think part of it is the media is hyping this one. And like I mentioned to you, they're hyping this relatively small number of deaths in Idaho. They're trying to add deaths wherever they can.
Sure.
By attributing, undetermined cause of deaths, largely of old people or people with pre-existing. I saw one, it was like somebody had leukemia, diabetes, something else, and they were like 65 years old. COVID-19 death, and I don't know about that, you know.
Yeah. Well, what they've said is some of them are anything you may die for if you have COVID will be counted towards COVID. I haven't seen any facts around that, with how that's being done or whatever. I don't know. I don't doubt it. It's possible. If they have the opportunity, I'm sure they'll continue to raise it. I mean, people are saying, look, don't give any attention to these protesters. The media is letting them see they're getting attention. The real problem is the reason the media is actually giving them the fuel to go do it, not because they're putting them on there for being out there doing the protesting, but the media is giving these people the fuel to go protest because they are saying these things and they are continuing to take away people's freedoms. And now more boldly, like another 2 weeks is nothing or another month is nothing. For some church services, they haven't met in 5 weeks, and you just announced, for example, in Missouri, you're not going to meet for another 4 weeks. So you're talking about 2 months of time where they're saying, we're taking your ability to meet together as a congregation away, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you've got two. So let's just be clear. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution says that the government shall not prohibit the free exercise of religion or abridge the right of the people to assemble peaceably, right? So if you forbid church services, that's two per se violations of the First Amendment. In the Heller decision, the famous gun case from a few years ago, in some of the dicta, the majority wrote that they know of no other, meaning other than the Second Amendment, no other enumerated constitutional right which is subject to an interest balancing approach. If it's in there and it's stated, it means what it says with the meaning that the people who adopted it had, right?
Sure.
So, and then the people who are trying to tell me that there's no constitutional issue when you are just doing a blanket ban on church services, and I'm looking at the Constitution, and I say, well, for exercise of religion, freedom to assemble peaceably.
Well, what they're saying is they can still assemble online. But see, I think there you're telling it, you're starting that part where you're now prohibiting how they meet.
The definitions of words.
Well, how they meet, right? So that's not how I meet. Honestly, it's an interesting thing. I'm surprised we haven't seen more backlash from this than we have from churches and religious institutions.
I'm disappointed.
I think it's been pretty sad overall because people don't want to go against the government. And I get that, right? There's 501c3 status things that are at risk and other reasons that people may or may not want to do anything about it.
You mean like Romans 13 reasons or?
Yeah, well, there's a few reasons that people give out there. But I've always told people.
Caesar and all that.
Well, that's a different thing. I think people kind of understand where that states. And then there's the idea where, that we're supposed to not forsake the gathering, where 2 or 3 or more are gathered. He's in the midst. And people are like, well, is he not big enough that he can't meet with you not in person? Can he not meet with you separately?
Well, the people that are usually saying that are also people who don't really believe. It's all the non-religious people who are like, hey, isn't your God big enough that he can overcome this? And it's like, wait a minute, what? 2 seconds ago, you were telling me I was an idiot for believing in God. So, you know what I mean? It's a little bit disingenuous, I think.
Well, no, it is, and it's a non-understanding of the Word of God just in general. Okay, so like you don't know me well, but I'm a person that thinks one of the reasons we've gotten here is because of these mega churches with 1,000 people and 10,000 people. You don't hear those churches talk about issues that are social issues that could cause any friction or backlash. So you
Oh,
won't
because
you
it's total big tent. Is that the
yeah,
idea?
right. Well,
Yeah.
they
That
have a
makes
lot.
sense.
They
It
have a
makes
lot
sense
of
to me.
people there, right? So like they can't
Yeah.
talk about what the Bible may say about abortion because there's a lot of
Because you're
people
going to offend
there.
somebody and they're going to
Yep.
leave. Yeah.
And then what does that do? It messes with their lifestyle. Maybe they can't drive as many fancy cars as they normally do. And you know that's the issue because here's what I come to. In America today, we have more mega churches and giga churches than we've ever had. Okay, so that's 1,000 churches or people with 10,000 churches or 10,000 people. 1,000
Yeah,
people or
Congress.
10,000 people. However, we have the smallest amount of church attendance in American history and the greatest decline in any one decade of church attendance ever. So what does that mean? It means that you're building a lot of people that aren't actually involved. They don't actually have to do anything. We've created this smorgasbord church environment in a lot of ways from these places where I want to go. I want it to be an hour long. I want my kids to have a giant swing inside and a zip line. I want cool TVs. I want coffee. I want donuts. And I want to be able to, take my coffee in there because if I can, it's not cool. It's not hip. And then so you've created this thing where they're really not that invested overall. And I know some people don't like to hear, but it's just my take. And now we're in a position where it's like, oh, you don't want us to come? That's okay. I mean, we don't think we should talk about
They weren't that
abortion?
serious about it anyway.
Well, good, right? It's pastor. Well, you shouldn't talk about abortion. Oh, we won't do that anymore. We'll make those private conversations. And that's because they don't want to face the backlash that comes with having those conversations. And they don't want to face the backlash because half their congregation may say, we shouldn't be meeting together. And maybe they don't want to explain to those people and say, hey, listen, while we don't say you have to be here, we still believe whether you want to come or anybody wants to come or we decide not to do it anyway. We can still decide not to have service. However, we believe they shouldn't have the right to tell us not to have it. And I think that's the issue at hand, right? So, and whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. That's what somebody should be able to agree on. I'm not saying we have to have it, right? And I'm not saying you have to come. We still may not. But I don't like the idea that a government can tell you you're not having it. And that's the difference where the choice has been stripped.
That is the difference. That's exactly the difference. Like Trump, he issued these guidelines, right? I mean, and they have no force at all. And I saw some people were trying to accuse people of hypocrisy. They're like, oh, you love Trump and Trump's on board with this. It's like, well, first of all, accusing someone of hypocrisy is a really dumb way to make an argument because it's like, okay, if I'm a hypocrite, what does that mean? Does that mean you're right? Does that mean if I was never born, you would not be right?
Sure.
So that's kind of dumb. But also, Trump didn't issue an order which makes holding a church service a misdemeanor crime. Governor Brad Little of Idaho did. I believe the governor of Michigan did. So, there's a little bit more immediacy there. And I don't know. I don't think you have to be a super religious person to just see that there's a problem when you're telling people you cannot gather together. And I'm a person of faith, but forget that for a minute. Like, let's say it's a club of atheists that want to meet.
Sure.
I would support their right to be able to hold that meeting. And like you said, no one has to come. We're not advocating the government go around and force people out of their houses and say you have to come to this meeting. Right. We're just saying, hey, if you want to do this, fine. And but people make choices all the time. We make choices about, am I going to go to that bad part of town because there's a concert I like playing there, right? You weigh the risks. That's what we do every single day in life. Life has a 100% mortality risk anyway. Hate to break it to folks, none of us are getting out of here alive. We all make decisions every day. You brought up the motor vehicles. That's a great example. There's 40,000 motor vehicle deaths in this country every year. We can eliminate them instantly by banning cars. We don't do that because economic cost benefit analysis is a real thing. And we have decided that the benefits of the personal automobile outnumber the certain fact that tens of thousands of people are going to die every single year because we have this.
Sure.
And no one is doing that with this coronavirus. I mean, no one is engaging in that calculus, and it's disturbing to me.
Well, it's easy not to do it because there's all the media's attention's on this. So you don't have to worry about anything else except for what they're telling you to focus on, which is always the issue. It's whatever the media happens to be talking about. That's what everybody wants to talk about. Kim said South Dakota did not shut down at all. They've had only 7 deaths. I read something today that they are now one of the hot spots. I don't know. and I don't say this meanly, but it's not a big state. I don't know what that means. Hotspots, there are like 10 people there that have it because it's not a huge state. Nora Wilson, I'm not even a religious woman, but churches do need to speak up and they need to have a clear voice. I 100% agree with that. I mean, again, it's just what I was saying, that it's a void because we've a lot of churches, not all, don't get me wrong, but a lot of churches have taken the back seat in conversations and let other people just tell them what they should and shouldn't talk about. What's socially okay to have a conversation about anymore. Otherwise, you'll end up on the news. Otherwise, you do this, you do this. And for a lot of folks, I think that's why the church the world is not afraid of the church anymore, because they know if we pressure them, they'll back down. There's too many things about it that are easy to push people around on that you used to not be able to get away with, and just back people down for their beliefs. And for years and centuries, people went to the stake and died for different things that they believed in. So it's interesting, and we'll see what happens. I think if this continues to happen and more people get through May and they say, hey, listen, you guys can't meet, I hope we start to see their voice come out. The governor of New Jersey said 2 days ago that part of the reason that they've done this is because he's met with the religious leadership and they're okay with not meeting. They're okay with them making that decision. And I say, well, what a shame that they're not saying, yeah, we're okay with not meeting by our own decision if we choose that, but you do not have the right to make that decision for us. And so what it's basically saying, what I take from that is, as long as your government officials feel like you're okay with the decision they're making, they'll continue to make that decision until you make a change. But if every church in your area decided we're not having it, we may still not meet, but we're at least going to have the option to make our own decision per the Constitution and our rights. If all the churches started doing that, they would have no choice but to relent and give you those decisions, or they're going to have a huge problem on their hand.
And honestly, I think that strategy, I guess, is kind of my greatest hope for what comes out of things like the protests we had here today. Like, so there's 1,300 of us out there, violating the law. If you consider a governor's unconstitutional, in my opinion, executive order the law, we were violating the law, right? And Boise Police Department was there. They were actually, I think they did a great job. I'm not going to rag on the BPD for today. They kept their distance. They were respectful, helpful, and they didn't arrest a single person. We were all allegedly subject to a misdemeanor charge. Yeah. Maybe I'll get a citation in the mail. Maybe. And if I go to court on it, if I have to pick up a misdemeanor on this one, I can live with that because I think it was the right thing to do. But this is what I hope. This is what I hope, is that they realize they can't do it to everyone. And if they couldn't do it to 1,300 people right in front of the state capitol, 1,300 people out there violating the law, where is the justice in going to the barber shop who's trying to pay, the barber who's trying to pay his mortgage this month, trying to keep his kids fed? Where's the justice in going to him and writing him a citation?
Sure.
When he's got 2 or 3 customers in there. Yep. And if nothing else, I hope it exposes the absurdity of the state, the absurdity of the enforcement, and the unfairness and the punitive nature on working class people.
Yeah, absolutely. So Neil said the meat processing plant in San Diego is the hot spot, 600 workers infected. All right, so that's where you can use caution, right? As an intelligent group of people working there, probably should shut that down, sanitize it, and those 600 people are going to need to go not be at work and infect any more people. And that's what I mean by we've got to be able to make responsible decisions. That's considered an essential business because it provides meat for our groceries.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one in South Dakota, right? Yep. Not San Diego.
Sorry, SD, South Dakota.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think I read that one plant accounted for like 4 to 5% of domestic meat production.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, I don't think it's going to impact the food supply that much. I'm starting to become more pessimistic.
Well, they shut down like 4 or 5 of their factories now.
I'm starting to worry about it, to be honest. I'm worried that working class people are going to be paying $20 a pound for ground beef. That is a concern.
Well, you didn't know you'd become a vegetarian, but the good.
Well, I think some of us might do a little unlicensed hunting before it comes to that.
The good news is that let me tell you guys this. One of the curves that aren't flattening is the one around my stomach. And that's from the food that has been coming in and out all day, every day. It's crazy. Nora said exactly, church leaders need to stand up for their congregations while at the same time being a leader by encouraging responsible gatherings. Agree. There was a pastor who went down in Florida. He got arrested, and I think it was Rodney Howard Johnson, something like that, was arrested, charged, released, and then he started getting death threats, so he decided not to meet. Which kind of blew my mind a little bit, because so the threat of dying from the disease didn't scare you, but the threat of someone coming to kill you, that's the one.
Yeah.
So I laugh because I think it's the same thing. Like, it's, if you believe in that God, the same one who could protect you here could protect you here. It's like, I don't know. It's a crazy thing in my mind.
The person is making the threat. Like, oh yeah, you're out here spreading this disease that can kill people, so I'm going to kill you.
I call. Well, I won't say it right now. It's a certain type of logic that's out there that doesn't make any sense. Joy Behar wants Trump supporters arrested, calling them racist over the Michigan protest. Well, I don't know how they're racist for one to do that. I mean,
and first of all, it's not just Trump supporters. Like, I mean, I'm not. Look, I'll speak straight up. I mean, philosophically, I'm an anarchist, okay? But I also live in the real world. There's an electoral process. I participate in the Idaho Republican Party. In terms of Trump, I kind of like him for the shock value. I'm not a huge Trumper, right? But that's okay. We had a huge tent at this event.
Yeah.
Health Freedom Idaho, the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, Idaho Freedom Foundation, all right? I mean, it's not just Trumpers that are violating this. And again, like I told you, I mean, there's that weak argument they try to pull that, oh, well, Trump's on board with this. And again, it's like, well, he issued a guideline and he's not God. And, even if you prove me a hypocrite, what does that mean? That's not an argument for your position.
Yeah, I don't think it's just Trump supporters either. I think there's a lot of things at stake here. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy just across the board. There were a lot of Democrats at the beginning of this, like Nancy Pelosi, in February saying, well, come on, it's okay to come to Chinatown and do stuff like that, as if it was a perfectly safe environment then, but then a couple days later, all of a sudden, you can't even be outside. So I think that's really like, you've got to be consistent. That's all I'm saying, is people need to have consistent process and evaluation to whatever comes their way when it comes in that vein, instead of just putting out ridiculous quotes and everything else. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I landed that. Well, I want to thank you for hopping on, and then, taking some time with us. Any last words for the people?
I really enjoyed it, Josiah. I appreciate you guys extending me the invite. Be happy to do it again anytime you want. I think people need to be prudent. I think they need to use caution. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. Everyone needs to gauge their personal risk tolerance. I mean, there is a chance that if you go out and violate one of these orders, and I'm only qualified to speak on Idaho law, but, in different states have similar things going on. But if you go out and violate one of these orders, yeah, you might get cited. You might be subject to a misdemeanor or whatever. Everyone has their own personal risk tolerance. I do hope, as this goes on longer, we're going to have more people standing up, and the government will realize we just can't go after everybody, and it will create the correct perception of manifest unfairness if we only go after select people. That's my hope. I've told people, again, I'm only qualified to comment on Idaho law, but I've suspended consultation fees for COVID-19 and stay-at-home order questions. I feel strongly enough about it.
How do they reach you? What's your website? How do they reach you?
Yeah, so they can look me up, DK, as in Delta Kilo, lawboise.com. Email me directly, edward@dklawboise.com, and call me, 208-713-8620. That's my direct line. Again, I'm only qualified to talk about Idaho law, but if anyone wants to speak to me about stay-at-home orders, COVID-19, and their rights, there's no consultation fee, and I'm happy to chat with them. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity, and, good luck and God bless.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful evening.
Hey, you too. Take good care
All
now.
right, likewise.
Still isn't here.
So, as you guys can know, what I would say is that people are looking for the opportunity and they're looking for people to stand up. You saw here this lady say, I'm not a religious person. I'm not somebody that's really out there, but I would like to see the church stand up and hear their voice. People have asked, why has the church shrank at a rate higher than ever before in history over the last decade? That's my answer, is that it used to be that going against the grain was okay. It wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't something that was looked upon bad. Now, if you do it, people often look at you in a very odd light, that you're disobeying the authorities, blah 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 blah. But when the authorities are going against your rights to do the things you need, at least to have a decision, then it's a whole different conversation and a whole different situation than what we're used to. And it's something that people have to consider. As long as you don't do something, the government will be fine continuing to take your rights away. And I don't care if it's just religious or you want to talk about any other form, they will continue to do it because it's easy to do right now. As you can see, it's been done with literally no second thoughts on taking people's rights away in the name of the virus. I get it. It's a serious thing. You should take it seriously. You should make wise decisions. You should be respectful of others. And you should do what you do responsibly. But at the same time, you should have an understanding that you have rights that don't just disappear because other people think they should in your moments of trouble and of pandemic. So Neil said Stanford study came out saying today the virus was probably here last fall/winter. I don't have any question about that, Neil. As people may have heard me say previously, I felt really, really sick December 31st and January 1st, and for about 10 to 14 days after that, had a horrible cough. And I never feel bad, but this, I couldn't even remember the first 2 days of it. So I have no doubt that it possibly could have been here. But what I would say is if you're out and you're doing these protests, be responsible and be respectful of people around you. If they don't want you close to them, don't be close to them. If you've got a mask, and you feel like you should wear it, wear it. But if you don't and you feel like you don't need to, that's also your right. But be responsible and respectful of people around you. I think ultimately that makes for a much better situation. Okay, and as churches and religious institutions, people should stand up and let them know that you believe your rights or that you should have the option to meet. I'm not saying as a church you have to meet, but I'm saying we should not be okay with people telling us you cannot meet. And that's a whole different situation than the ability to choose not to meet. And it just seems like way too many people are okay with them saying you can't, instead of saying you have the option, we would like you not to, and if you are going to, we'd like you to keep these certain parameters that we would like to have. 110% up to you. Here's the thing about China's one other thing I was going to talk about was China's numbers, okay? So I don't know if you guys saw this, but China, Wuhan area, just the Wuhan area alone, lied about their numbers by 1,300 deaths, okay? That they miraculously figured out today that they had missed. That 1,300 more people had died than they anticipated or they thought had died. How do you misplace 1,300 people dying? Anybody? Because that makes no sense to me whatsoever. The fact that you had 1,300 people, okay? 1,300 people that died more than what they originally reported. So if that's the case in Wuhan, what do you think is going to happen in all these other places and all the other cities that had a lot of people in cases of the virus in China? You're going to see more and more of that. That's just Wuhan. So it's interesting to me. So all this information is still coming out. But I think it gives us some insight on how clear and transparent China was with their information. Ultimately, that's going to impact us. That is insane. 1,300 people they found died that they hadn't found before. And you look at it, and that is a large portion. We've had, I think, 30,000 deaths here in the United States, around there. and they had 1,300 that they just found in one city today. So that is something people should be cautious about. People should be, mindful about, that there are things going on that you're not being told the exact truth about. You're finding out later, and you're going to continue to see that as we move forward. And it's not okay, right? The last thing was, what is the future of the church? So churches should wonder what's going to happen over the next few days, weeks, and months. Well, if you're in Kansas City, they just said through May 15th, you're not going to be able to meet. So that's another, 4 or 5 services, something like that. At least 4 services more, if you're talking Sundays, that you won't be able to meet. Not because you chose not to, but because government told you no. Some people say you should sue your local government. If that works for you, go for it. Like the gentleman just said, Edward just said, who's an attorney in Idaho, that this is not going to be, it's not going to be an easy court case. It might create some bad case law. I can't disagree with that. I'm not an attorney. But what I would say is that if you stand quiet now, then when they continue to take your rights, or later when they decide that you may not be able to meet for this reason or that reason, you have no room to complain. I saw they are now saying they're off their numbers by 50% in China. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. They're off by 1,300 in just one city, automatic, just out of the blue. So who knows what those numbers will end up looking like. But what I would say is people have to make a decision on your rights right now, okay? And I would believe that that religious belief and confidence in their beliefs would need to be one of the strongest and highest that there is. When comparing to just the general public that's now going out and protesting, saying you can't have our rights. We want to be able to hang out with our friends. We want to be able to go to our jobs. And yet most of the Christian church is dead silent. But the public is more passionate about getting back to their work than a lot of churches are about getting back to their congregation. And I'm not talking about pastors. I'm talking about church people too. It's just because we've come into an age of silence around the clock where we don't like to talk about certain things. We don't like to ruffle feathers. And that's where we've kind of stood. We've become okay with that. And any out will do. And so we have to be careful and we have to be cautious about our rights and what we do as we move forward. This is a new time. This is a new age. New things are happening. The way things are happening are completely different. So I want to thank Edward Dindinger for jumping on and what the information he gives, the legal thoughts that he had about the different situations that are going on. His time is very, very precious, and we appreciate him. If you'll like and follow the page, so you can get updates. We'll be having more conversations, and share the video if you want to, or you will. People can get on, and if they have something to say, we're taking other people who are attending protests over tomorrow and the next day through video, and we'll be interviewing them, and we'll be having another conversation on religion and churches and other things that are going on. We'll even get into a little race tomorrow, as the numbers seem to have normally be affecting the African American community more than everyone else. And so maybe we'll talk about that and see what that is. People are afraid of criticism being accused of not caring about other people's lives. Well, everybody's going to be criticized one way or the other. One day we'll be criticized for the silence, or now we'll be criticized for being too loud. Whichever way you fall, doesn't matter. People have to make the decision. Hope you guys have a great Friday night. Look forward to chatting with you guys later. If you have anything you'd like to chat about or jump on ever, let me know. Shoot me an inbox. Shoot me a message about it. Again, share video, like, and follow the page to get updates on when we're live and what we're doing. Have a great day. I guess Missouri will be protesting in Jeff City on Tuesday. So if you want to take part of that, there's your option to do so. Please let us know if you guys have any questions. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow on our live feed.